Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hello, thanks for joining me today. I am Karen McNenny, your Good Divorce Coach. And today on the Good Divorce Show, we're talking with Mercedes Barker. Thanks for coming on to the show and chatting with us. Welcome, Mercedes.
Well, thank you, Karen. This is a lot of fun. It always is. So I'm enjoying it.
I mentioned in the introduction that you came on to the show to share your own divorce story, which absolutely is one of the great good divorce stories. I encourage our listeners to go back and listen to it. So you come with a relevant perspective, but you also come with a litany of relevant skill set. Can you just one more time give us the breakdown of all the things that you touch and have knowledge about that ultimately are connected to a divorce experience?
Absolutely. Well, I'm an investment advisor. I have a securities brokerage firm, and I've been in that business for close to 30 years. And I'm a certified divorce financial analyst, which is the person who helps put together the whole settlement, all the financials. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in Texas. I'm a licensed mortgage broker as well. And I'm a certified divorce lending professional as it relates to just divorce topics. And I'm a mediator. I'm a civil and family child custody mediator. So it's just sort of all these tools kind of come to. Oh, I'm also a divorce coach, of course. I forgot about that part of it. Yeah. Yes. So it's just all of these things that come to all these little different skill sets and knowledge that come to a divorce. And most divorces need quite a bit of all of it.
Yes, so I think we underestimate, and as you use the language, we have to divvy up all of these parts of the family assets. And I think we underestimate how much is actually in that divvy up bucket. What are the things that couples and families typically miss? So where do, the obvious ones is we have a house and maybe we've got some other assets. We've got a car, maybe there's some retirement out there. Drill down for us where we miss the divvy up focus.
Sure. Yeah, most people that come to me wanting to divorce think that it's the house, it's the belongings, it's maybe separate property, how to address that, and they think that's pretty much the divvy up picture, but it really goes well beyond that. Think of just friends and family. In a divorce, are you divvying up in-laws? Are you divvying up friends that were for both of you are now choosing sides? There's all that aspect of divvying up. I have a little pad here. I'm looking at notes because it's actually quite a bit. Friends and family, time with your children, that gets divvied up. Yes. We think of, visitation. Yes, there's schedules, but it goes beyond that. You're missing out. You're dividing up that intimacy and family time that those kids were used to having. And that's not a small thing. And it does get typically overlooked. I'll get them for the weekend, you get them for that weekend, I'll have them for the summer. But no. What about things like, and this for me would be a big one because in my marriage, it was a big deal, the family bed. And what I mean by family bed is obviously a loving space where one is doing homework, the other one is reading a book, the other one's watching something on TV. And it's just that space that you're together and you can wrestle and you do a little of that pinching and squeezing and having fun and there's laughter. That's gone. With the divorce, it's essentially gone. And that, at least to me, was one of the biggest things I felt when we went through our separation. Interestingly, sometimes I made it happen anyway. When Raul would come over and visit and we just still kind of hang out. Hey, let's watch this movie. And we watch it all in bed, It's the kids that suffer, right, from that kind of divvying up. And yet I would say that's probably so common. All those things you miss of being together as a family. anyway, I had that down because that was a big one for me. And of course, well, financials, mortgages, those are big things. Dividing up the house, maybe it was 2 incomes and one home, and now you have 2 incomes and 2 homes. But relationships get divided. And there are many kinds of those that get divided. Even work relationships can get convoluted when they're used to seeing the couple, as a couple, and then he did, then she did, but she told me, but he said. It's really sometimes having to start over completely with a clean slate, and that's traumatic.
Yeah,
I think it's traumatic.
Yeah. Even the pets. Sometimes I know pets get divided or shared.
I have a case right now with that. Yeah. It's like, well, when can I have the dog? But here's the thing, right? The dog doesn't play with everybody anymore.
Yeah.
Right? The dog plays with one or plays with the other, or the kids kind of go back and forth. So I think when you're working with a couple that's getting divorced, when you're working with one, it's a lot harder because you're an advocate for one and you're not even talking to the other. So it's difficult to get kind of an agreement. But when you're working with a couple, when you bring these things to them, they're in a fog, right? They're an emotional roller coaster right now. They can't even think of those things. That just doesn't even cross their mind. But when you can start to, think about this, think about the other, there's sometimes with these real aha moments when they realize just how much they are splitting, how much they are changing the dynamic. Not that they shouldn't get divorced. I'm not saying that. This is no judgment or anything. It's just when you have an awareness of it, I think it helps going forward. I mean, even little things like doing homework with kids, I don't know. I remember when my kids were little, it was the kitchen table mostly, either the family bed or the kitchen table, but it would be wherever everybody was.
Right.
And that changes. Right?
Well, let us dive into one of those, really big assets and something that is going to change in virtually every family, which is where we live and how we live.
Big time.
And, the biggest investment most of us make is into our home. And let's just presume that home was purchased together by both parents and that they own it together. Talk us through literally every little step that we have to think about with that asset, not just like you're keeping the house, I'm keeping the house, but the complexity of where did the down payment come from? Who's actually been paying the mortgage? How might that be divided? We have a shared title, refinancing, all of these components that most of us, when we buy our home, we're not even thinking about how we're going to unravel, right? How do we unravel that shared property?
Yeah, and that's a great subject because that tends to be, for many marriages, the largest asset. And one that everybody is kind of emotionally attached to.
I was going to say,
I've run into very few say, "Oh, I don't care about that house,"
Right.
They usually do care about that house.
Home, we can get, our heart grips around that. It's stability. And sometimes someone can stay. Sometimes neither of them can afford to stay. That's another piece of the journey. So there's a logical part about doing this, but there isn't a huge emotional component about the family home.
Very, very much so. And there's a lot of confusion about what can be done, how it's done. And many times I'll have cases where, and it's usually the wife that wants to keep the house. And it seems logical to do so. But they haven't thought through how they're going to do that.
Right.
And it's complicated sometimes. So for example, a lot of couples, one may put in separate property. They're kind of married young. Maybe they got something from their parents, or they had a little bit of savings before, or their second marriages, and now they've got a little nest egg of something. And they say, "Don't worry about it. I'll put down the 20%. No big deal. I love you forever, so it's not going to matter." That kind of stuff. Nobody thinks they're getting divorced, of course. And so now you have separate property in this home. And
just clarify. Separate property, right? We're going to sort of pull out all of this jargon that those of us in the industry, but what that basically means is one party brought the 20% down. It's premarital property. So that's a separate property. So it gets treated differently.
It does indeed.
Should be, or can be, it should be taken into consideration.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely should be taken into consideration. The issue sometimes when it's separate property, at least in the state of Texas, if one spouse is claiming separate property, the burden is on them to prove it. And sometimes it's easy to prove, right? Came from this account, I had it before marriage, and here's the transfer, it went to the title company, bim, bam, boom. This is not hard to explain. But when it goes through, well, I put it in the joint first because we were buying some bicycles and then we were going to do this, and then yeah, and that may not fly because you've already given it. It's a gift to the marriage. And so people get very angry when they realize that something as little as that could make a huge difference. We're talking a lot of times, $100, $200, $300,000,
right?
And they always thought that was theirs. And as I always say, you marry for love usually, right? Most people do, but divorce is about money, and most of the time it is. And if you feel you're being shortchanged, and the other spouse is, well, you didn't say it was separate. It's hard to get that across. So that can get very emotional, and it can get quite ugly. That's a different thing. But
that's the first thing to think about is where was the down payment originated from?
Where did it originate from?
First task with real estate.
Can you trace it?
And can you trace it and prove it?
Yep. That's number one. And of course, I would say to anybody who's getting married and thinking of doing this, please don't do things without prenupping.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to do. I know when you don't think about it and you're young and, but
anyway. You know what I say, Mercedes, every time I get on an airplane, the first thing they do is tell me, if this plane goes down, here's what you need to do. We don't want the plane go down. We don't think it'll go down.
I know.
It normally doesn't, but every time they make sure that we're prepared. And I kind of feel the same way about marriage. Like, it's really easy to get married and really, really difficult to get unmarried.
Yeah.
So just make sure you check all the boxes as you go.
Yeah, if there's just some steps you could take if one is a little aware of it,
Right.
But most people aren't, especially first marriages. Second marriage, you get really smart. But the first one, you're young and dumb, and that's just the way it is. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
So next, now we have a title. So we bought a house together. We put both of our names on the title, and we're getting unmarried. And let's presume that one party is going to keep that house. What do we need to think about in terms of transferring ownership, and what is the process, and what are the things we should be watching for?
Well, the first thing is there debt? Is there a mortgage?
Which most usually there is. Not many of us own their house. Yep.
That's correct. If they own it, that's really a non-issue. Well, that's not true. Let me get back to that in a second. But mortgage, so the real question is, maybe the spouse says, or maybe the husband says to the wife, no problem, I want you to have the house. That's fine. Yeah, well, the mortgage has to be paid off. So there's a loan there. There's also assets that will need to be paid to the husband, whatever the equity is, whatever the house value is, market value or appraisal minus mortgage. What you have left is the equity of the house. So let's just say the house has an equity of $300,000 and you're splitting it half. There's $150,000 that needs to be paid to him. If you don't have those assets somewhere else, now not only do you need to borrow for the mortgage, you need to borrow an additional $150,000 to buy him out.
Correct.
I'm going to tell you, many people can't do that.
Right. Because that's going to increase your monthly mortgage. And
you have to have a job.
You're going from a 2-income household to a single-income household. And that can really be a pinch for people. And let's say that you were paying $1,000 a month for your mortgage. That would be a miracle. And now you had to take out another chunk to pay to your spouse. So now your mortgage might be $2,000 a month.
And do you qualify?
For that?
That's the big one.
On your income.
That's the big one right there.
And maybe
do you qualify?
The spouse that's leaving the house might be the person who was the higher wage earner. And you not, even if you could afford it and you have some lump sums, right? The bank still is going to look at you individually as someone to invest in. Can you actually qualify for the loan you now need on that house?
That's correct. That's exactly it. And if you don't qualify, that's no go. And
that's a no go.
That's a no go. And it's a painful no go when they realize that I thought I could have it. Why can't the court just say it's mine? Well, no, because in the decree, it may say you're awarded the house, but there's still a contract that has nothing to do with the divorce with the lender.
With the bank. Yes.
With the bank. That has nothing to do with the divorce decree.
That's right.
So the person who is on the loan will be the one responsible for paying it. He can't get, I say he, because we were doing a situation of a husband, wife, but he can't get off of that. Without paying it off. And so this gets to, now there are things, and this is where my lending professional area kind of helps. There are ways, if possible, that's what I look at. Is there any way we can create with the assets that they have qualifying income? What's qualifying income? Child support is qualifying income. Spousal, something that's very difficult to get in Texas, but spousal is also qualifying income. Which to say that it's different.
People know that as alimony.
Some people know that as alimony.
Spousal support is different than child support. But both of those payments from your previous spouse, if that's how the teeter-totter shapes up, you can include those in your qualifying income, which is
a catch.
Yeah, give us the catch.
Okay, it's not that simple. Hey, don't worry, I'm going to get spousal coming up right now. It's on the decree sheet. No, they want, and this is Fannie Mae. This is not even the bank. These are rules that you have to go by. And I don't know if it's 3 months, 6 months. I'd have to look it up. But they want 3 to 6 months. Let's say it's one or the other. But payments already court ordered, and a court order for at least 36 months more. Otherwise, no go.
To see that money somewhere in a bank account? Is that what you're saying? Like that?
No, they need to see that it's court ordered, that the husband is going to pay that amount of money. So what happens? You get people with 16-year-olds. So many people divorcing don't have little ones where they have a long time to be able to juggle. So for example, in Texas, spousal maintenance is really hard to get. But if you are trying to put a picture together, instead of this amount here, why don't we turn that into a spousal agreement so that she can better qualify for a loan? You see, so I try to work around little things like that, because when I'm working with a couple, these agreements are private. They're not court ordered. It's not the judge telling them how they need to do it. It's that we're trying to find the path for them to be able to create that income. Trusts income is another one, and that has also some requirements. So I try to see if there's such a thing, right? The worst part is there is no such thing. Or the child support is still not enough. If the wife doesn't really work, or works and is kind of minimum wage, or works part-time, because with the kids and all that kind of stuff, I mean, they're just not, it's very difficult to get there. They would need to be making some pretty decent income to be able to afford the house. So then it's, well, is there any place we can pay the house off? I don't know. Looking at it from the
or pay it down.
Well, no, because there can be no loan. So it's either pay it off, or I'm talking about the ones that can't get the loan, right? We can't figure out the loan. Of course, the other option is the husband says, okay, you know what? I'll just keep paying the mortgage. All right. And we'll just go from there. The problem, and that's very kind, of course, but that doesn't always work well either, because he's not going to qualify for a home. He's not going to qualify, unlikely. He would qualify for 2 mortgages, one for himself, because he's moving out.
Yes.
So that puts him in a bind and in an expense and kind of wasted investment, because when you're renting, and sometimes that's a better solution, but that money is gone and you're just throwing it away. You're not investing in your property, right? So there's some downside to that too. I would say in most of those cases, the realization is we got to sell, and each one walks away with their 100,000 or whatever it is and starts over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painful. That's a painful thing to go through.
And they still have to go and qualify for a loan within their means, which means maybe you lived in a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house together, 2 income, and now you're in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo.
Yeah, or you're renting
you can afford
until you can build it, because you need 2 years of income. Right.
So let's say that our spouse that's staying with the house has the means to stay there. There is still this kind of what I call is a little insult to the injury of divorce. And it would be great if you and I were married, Mercedes, and I'm going to stay in the house and we're both on the title. And I say, well, let's just go to the title company and take your name off the title and move on our merry way. But you don't actually get to do that because there's still a mortgage. The bank is going to want you to refinance, which is their way of saying, we want to make sure, Karen, if you're keeping the home, that you can afford the home, which is like buying a home all over again. And the appraisal and all the fees, right? Like everyone's kind of got a hand in your pocket in order to take that loan and move it into just my name. And in doing so, now the title company will say, okay, Karen, you have the debt on the house. You get to have your name on the title and it's all yours. And Mercedes is gone. But that's a whole series of steps and expense as well that I think.
Yeah, that's refining. That's buying the house pretty much.
Buying the house all over again.
And you got to pay the spouse the equity.
So and you got to pay off.
To be more expensive.
Part of the equity as well. That's right. So that's something to think about just in terms of how.
But the environment we're in, the interest rate environment we're in plays a huge role right now.
Yeah, it does. I say it's holding people hostage to their homes.
It's just terrible.
So explain,
but there are ways.
Explain why. I'll give a little overview and you're going to give us the why. So let's say I currently have a mortgage at my home and it's at 2.75% interest because I refinanced when things were really, really low. And so that interest rate, not only do I pay less over time, but I pay less every month. And it's like having the golden goose, those really low interest rates that we all got kind of in the early, or mid, around 2020, I suppose. It's about when that was happening, pre-pandemic. It was a glorious time. So now I have to go refinance my home at maybe 7 or 8%. And we're recording this in 2024, mid 2024. So I'm hoping that those of you who listen to this in the future, that it's changed again for the better. But it means that if I go refinance, I'm no longer going to have my golden goose of 2.75% interest. I'm going to go to.
You may not be able to afford it. Yeah.
Which means my mortgage is going to go up month to month. And I'm going to be paying a lot more over that 30-year loan.
That's correct.
There are families who are needing to nest, which means both spouses are coming in and out of that one house with maybe just renting an apartment somewhere else because they can't afford to leave it. It might mean I've got a couple right now who decided dad's going to move out, mom's going to stay in the family home. She's going to assume the entire payment. But it's not in the best interest of the family. And what's in the best interest of the finances for the family is in the best interest of the children to refinance that home right now because they want to keep both of them are on the same page. We want to keep this home in the family and for the kids. So they've just written into their decree that she has ownership, even though he's on the title, that she is assuming the full mortgage, and that within 5 years, if and when lending rates go down to 5% interest, she must refinance and remove him from the title at that time, right? It takes a huge leap of faith and trust on the part. And these are for our typically low conflict, amicable, our marriage is complete. We are going to be unmarried, but we have a forever relationship. What's the best thing that we can do for our financial perspective right now?
Well, and it's a burden on him because he can't buy a home during that period.
Typically not. This particular couple already owns a second home.
That makes it a lot easier. Yeah.
So he moved into that home, right? And that's kind of a really unique case. But this is what Mercedes and I are talking about and why there's value in working with coaches and financial analysts and CDFAs.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to problem solve with you to find a solution that is in the best interest of your future. Whereas a lawyer might just say, we're going to fight to fill the bucket.
Yeah, no
regardless
good.
Of the result and how it might.
And they're not thinking of all of these moving parts because they're not
all
trained.
lawyers, but from time to time we run into this with our legal partners, and they do wonderful.
Oh, absolutely.
Part of why we're having this conversation today is so that our listeners can really know that there are problem solving and creative solutions.
That's
so
correct.
Go back, Mercedes, to this idea of, okay, we got to move the title around and we got to refinance, but we might be held hostage right now. What are some other recommendations and insights that you might offer up?
I'll give you a really quick.
I love a case study.
Yeah, this is a case study. Actually, this wasn't my case, but an attorney told me about it. A couple from Florida, gray divorce. They really did love each other. This was totally amicable.
And a gray divorce, again, I'm just going to keep because
I'm sorry.
You and I know divorce, all these things is us, right? It's that usually over the age of 60, that That's you're correct. Moving closer towards retirement. There is a bigger movement. It's a different perspective. We're no longer growing our career and our income. We're starting to come to a place where we're going to be living on a finite income. And that changes our investments and our division of property. Like it's just a unique set of circumstances.
And they're usually friends. I would say a lot of times these gray divorces, they've already been through all the fighting. They're not interested in that. They just had enough, and they want to
live independently for this last chapter.
And that's kind of an easier type divorce. However, with this story, she loved their home, and I mean, really loved it. She put a lot of time in it and fixing it and loved the garden and all that good stuff. And he didn't care. You know, he's still paying the mortgage and he didn't care. And he really wanted to give it to her and give her peace of mind. So the mortgage is in his name. Both of them are on the title. And as a gift, he says, I'll tell you what, don't worry about it. I'll remove myself from the deed and I'll continue to pay the mortgage. Don't worry about it. Wow, very loving thing. You know what happened? They get divorced, and shortly after, she dies. What happens? He doesn't own the house, but he owns the debt.
Wow.
So, you know, we don't think of those things, right? I mean, I know they didn't. I mean, the attorney said they weren't thinking of that at all, you know, of these possibilities, but they went ahead and did something they should not have done, right? And I'm really surprised that in Florida, they let him get off the deed. I don't understand how that happened.
So deed and title?
Yeah, deed and title. I'm sorry. Yes.
Same language. So the ownership, that's the title, and the loan is something totally different. So he said, I will come off the title, but I will keep paying towards the house.
Yeah. For you. Yes. I know how much it means to you. So she dies. And the house goes to her heirs, which I'm assuming were the kids. I don't know. I don't know beyond that. But I do know it was one big legal mess because he's got all this debt and he can't take charge. He can't sell it. He can't rent it. He can't do anything because it's not his.
It's so bizarre.
It is. So, you know, when people start saying, well, I'll just get myself off there. Whoa. Let's walk through this very carefully. But anyhow, getting back to titles and all that kind of stuff, absolutely for sure. And I don't think in Texas anyway, you can get yourself off of the deed if you still have a mortgage. The bank won't let you do that. But keep that in mind. Whoever is paying needs to stay on. Now, let's talk about a little bit on that interest rate thing because it does matter, and especially in gray divorces. Well, anytime, but gray divorces are especially difficult because, as you say, usually they've started on their fixed income and you know, they're aging, right? So because I'm there. You know, think about our health. Think about how much more time do I have?
So hold on. Before you go into the thing, I first want to just unpack interest rates, which is what the bank is going to charge you to loan you money. So if they loan you $100,
cost of borrowing,
they're going to want you to pay back. I don't know. At this point, is 100
probably 7.5% or something, 7.5% or somewhere in there.
So you're paying back more, and that's why the interest rate really matters, because it does
yes.
affect your monthly payment and the overall long journey of how long you have that
That's
loan.
correct.
So, okay.
That's correct. So that's right. So now they have this, wonderful loan, as you say, 2.5%, 3%, which was just wonderful. And how can I keep it? Well, there are ways if you have, again, qualifying income. There are two types of assumptions. There's the assumption where the lender says, hey, your divorce decree says that you're going to keep the house, and that's fine. But and they're agreeing to that you're going to make the payments and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't make the payments, who's going to make them? So it's the one that signed. I mean, it's the other spouse. They're never relieved from it. When it's just when you talk about loan assumptions, you need to take it one step further, which is the full assumption, which is, can I take over the loan at the current interest rate that I am paying with all the same agreements? Can I just take it over incident to divorce? I would say that even less than a year ago, this was something that nobody had asked for, because who's worried about 2.5%? But it's becoming the demand is so high now that lenders are more and more accepting of doing that. Okay. And but there's a process to get a full assumption. You still have to qualify. It's as if you were doing a new loan, but all they're saying is, okay, we won't do a new loan, just keep the one you have, which you still have to go through the qualification process. If you don't have the income, you're not going to qualify.
Well,
so
assuming the loan at the old interest rate would be fantastic. Are you finding a lot of lenders are willing to do this? Do you need to ask
more
for
it? Yes. Yeah. Some of them were like, no, sorry, no assumptions allowed. No, they are now, because there's quite a demand. But you still have to qualify. They're not going to just give it to you because your divorce decree says so. You still have to qualify no matter what. So, but there is a way to get that interest rate if your lender will agree. And I'm telling you, more and more do. Now, it used to take up to a year to see if you get that approval. That puts in some pressure on the couple that's trying to get a divorce. I have one recently that was told 90 days. So that's better. They're getting better. But yeah, that's interest rates. That's a major situation. But keep in mind that anything that is not a buyout, that is not a refi and buying out the partner, there is a disadvantage for the one leaving. If you
think more about that, the person who's leaving.
Yes,
let's say. So we're in that situation where the spouse that's staying in the property, they can own it. They buy them out, all that, but then there's someone leaving without that significant asset. Say more about their options and what you recommend.
Their option is, if they're going to buy a house, they're stuck with the higher interest rates.
Right.
So that can be a bitter pill. You can get the full assumption, but here I am having to pay 7.5%. Nobody's liking this right now. And it is unfair. It feels unfair, right? They should be walking away with their share of the equity. Sometimes, depending on the case, and I'm working with one right now in that situation, and she's 62 and no potential income, to give more of the assets so that they can go ahead and just buy their home. Of course, there has to be assets for that, right? And there has to be a willingness to do a 60-40 or even a 70-30 split. But for gray divorces, not having that roof over your head and having to now suddenly try to qualify for a mortgage at a 7.5, that's a killer. That's just a killer.
And you might already be at your fixed income.
Exactly.
Yes. And
so
starting
it is
over.
ugly. So if there's money, I try, it doesn't always work, but I try to, like, okay, come on. You got to try to work together. It may not be a fair split, but both of you having a roof over your head, given the income that you have, and you being able to, get the full assumption, yada, yada, or whatever. Come on. It's the right thing to do. It may not be the fair thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. so that everybody can get off on a good footing.
But sometimes we say fair means the same, right? Equal.
I know.
And I know in Montana, the language, it's not equal, it's equitable.
Equitable. That's correct.
And I like to work with my clients and say, what is actually fair and appropriate, which may not be $1 for $1. We're trying to, like, nobody wanted to get here. Here we are. Now, what can we do so that we both can launch into this next chapter with stability and a roof over our head, and know that one of us isn't going to be destitute. And that is the distinction between divorce professionals like you and I that are trying to find the common ground, right? You can either be right or make it right. And we're on the side of helping to make it right for both. Whereas when you get into a litigious, when you're moving into litigation, and those lawyers, they are trained to do precisely what they're going to do for you, which is fight for everything that you can get without regard to the other party, typically, unless you're in a collaborative or cooperative legal conversation. You know, Mercedes and I have partnered with couples where we try to mediate, like this progressive mediation and conversation about getting you to a place of stability equally. And then we just go to the lawyer and say, this is what's been decided. Please draft it. Or in your case, in the state of Texas, you can draft it. And it's not handing over your precious, private, personal story of the past, present, and future to someone who is trained to just fight, but to actually get into a cooperative conversation and do the brainstorming so that both of you have a stable home life in the future. It is one of the most essential cornerstones of our existence as a human, is we need a roof over our head.
Yes, but I will say one thing, and it's hard to, and I'm in agreement with you, but it does require that the couple have a, you know, they need to have a good relationship of some kind. They need to have some sort of solid foundation. But what I'm running into in situations like this, for example, you know, Texas is a no-fault state, so infidelity plays no role, but it does in the heart.
Yes,
and it does in the pocketbook. So when you're asking a spouse, you know, try to be understanding and try to be like, what? I'm going to be understanding? So-and-so has been unfaithful to me. I mean, you have to understand also the dynamic, and sometimes those endings aren't great. I mean,
they're not.
I wish it would have been different, but and I struggle with it. It's like, when do I, as a professional, kind of pushing the envelope to you know, let's kind of be more equitable when one really just wants a pound of flesh of the other. And you can't argue that, you know, that what they're feeling isn't normal and fair and you know,
legitimate. And so, that's right.
And so
it does not apply to all cases. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It knows when
they're complicated.
When they've already eroded and it's gotten hard, I always just say, honey, all of us, like, do not stay too long. Leave while there's still love.
Yes.
It's a paradigm shift for the married folk out there who are contemplating divorce. I'm like, well, I don't know. Nobody's cheating. Nobody's like running away with the money. Nobody's a drunk alcoholic every night beating me. I don't have any good cause, right? We end up being our own cause makers.
That's right.
To exit. We know our truth long before we speak it.
Absolutely.
I encourage people to move upon that truth while there's still love, before you've blown up everything, that you can take that necessary ending. It's very hard.
I know. It's hard. And it's hard and this would probably be a subject for another conversation. It's very hard when the relationships have morphed into a toxic one, and they don't know they're in a toxic relationship. And that is a whole different ballgame, because they can't see it.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do. And it takes a lot of conversations and a lot of heartfelt stuff. And it isn't easy when there are patterns of behavior. And ultimately, when you still love somebody, as toxic as it may be, when you still feel, right, there's always that hope that they're going to change this time. You know, this time it's going to be okay, because he or she realizes my worth and blah 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 blah. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, that's not, or 9.5 or 9.9 times, it's not really quite there. But yeah, it's a process they have to go through.
I commend people and couples to do the work, right? I don't think anyone should just jump out of the absolutely. I know
I agree.
People facing divorce have already been through a lot of
they have.
Might be counseling, or distorted hope, realistic hope, hopelessness.
All of it. Yeah.
It's interesting as we talk about real estate, we've come back to the heart. The heart and the emotion is such a constant thread through all of the financial conversations. Before we leave the topic of real estate, Mercedes, and wrap up this segment.
Yes.
Can you talk about reverse mortgages, what it is, how they work, why you might want to consider it?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in reverse mortgages. I'd have to kind of look up, because every one of them have so many different bells and whistles. But the concept, the concept is the house is paid off. Maybe not. Maybe they have a mortgage, but they're going to pay you.
Who's they?
Well, the reverse mortgage company offers these. It's reverse, because instead of you paying for a mortgage, they're paying you, and in turn, you're giving up more and more of your property.
So it would seem that maybe in those gray divorces, or when you're older and you're like, this is where I'm going to be. I maybe don't need to sell that asset. I need to live in this asset. So the mortgage company might pay me. So let's go back. I like the simple numbers. I think it helps all of us understand. And you're a number gal, so I'm going to dumb it down for our listeners. We've got $1,000 a month that I owe on my mortgage. I'm now 70 years old. I'm in good health. I want to live in this house for another 15 years, but I'm divorced. My income has changed. I go to a reverse mortgage company. They might pay me now $1,000 a month to take ownership of my home gradually, or do they take it in its entirety at the time?
It's a really great question, because I remember when reverse mortgages first came out, if I'm not mistaken, you were pretty much giving up your home. Yeah. So if you lived until you were 100, you've come out probably ahead. But if you die 2 years later, you just lost, or your heirs lost a piece of investment, a home. So, but now they have, I think, all kinds of, so much was paid, so there's still this much equity. Your heirs can still, I don't know, they'll pay some, I don't know, there's just a bunch of bells and whistles like that. They're much better than what they were. And maybe there are cases where this really works for somebody. I'm always a little reluctant to give my property away like that, but there may be cases. I just can't speak to it, because I haven't really had a case where I've had to delve into it to help a couple. I've never had that yet. Anyway.
Well, our job is to lay out a smorgasbord.
Absolutely.
So that people, again, we're not advising do this, do that. This is better. Every situation is unique. What we want you to know, listeners, is that getting into a conversation with a professional to brainstorm what is going to be the right answer for you, that's where your power comes, so that you can design your divorce. We're chatting today with Mercedes Barker of yourdivorce.com. and certified divorce financial analyst, real estate broker, investor, divorce coach. And this isn't going to be the end of our time with Mercedes Barker. We have more to chat with and to learn about. Is there anything else in the real estate bucket that you want to throw out there for us, Mercedes?
No, what I wanted to throw out was the website is your-divorce.com. There's a little dash in the middle.
Good. We do want to know that, so people can find you. Your-divorce.com.
Absolutely. And the phone number is 833-DIVVY-UP. That's where Divvy Up comes from. Wonderful. So yes, but real estate, no, it's complex. It depends on everybody's needs. And that's why you want professionals to walk you through it, so you make the informed decisions. You're right. Exactly like that.
That's great. Thank you for listening to the Divorce Show today. I'm Karen McNenny, your good divorce coach. And remember, folks, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram at Good Divorce Coach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.